Bonjour mesdames, messieurs, j'aimerais vous souhaiter la bienvenue à ce troisième débat. Et après ces quelques mots en français, je passe en anglais qui va être la langue du débat que nous avons aujourd'hui. It is indeed a pleasure to have you here for the third policy debate organized by International Development Policy, our journal. And today we have a live policy debate on a written debate which we have published last December, I think, at the end of last year, on commodity trading and development with a special focus on Switzerland. And as you may know, Switzerland has become quite an international hub for commodity trading. According to some estimates, commodity trading represents about 3% or even more than 3% of the gross national product of Switzerland. And for Geneva, for the canton of Geneva, this figure might be around 9% of the gross cantonal national product. So it is an important issue, and we want also to discuss a bit more about the specific role of Switzerland. When we published the policy debates on our website, we had the chance to count on 4 outstanding contributions. We have published a lead paper by Werner Thut, who is here with us from the Swiss Development and Cooperation Agency, SDC. And this was followed by reactions from Professor Humberto Campodónico of the National University San Marcos of Lima in Peru, and of Mr. Stéphane Graber, who is the Secretary General of the Swiss Trading and Shipping Association. We had also another contribution from Alexandra Gilles, who is in charge of governance for the Revenue Watch Institute in New York, but she's not with us for this debate now live. So let me briefly introduce our 3 speakers, who will have about 10 minutes maximum for introducing the main points of their contribution, their written inputs to you. And then we will open the discussion after half an hour for another half hour of debate with you, with the audience. First, I will give the floor to Mr. Werner Thut, who has been with the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation since 1999 and currently holds the position of Senior Policy Advisor, focusing mainly on commodity trading, commodities and trade, illicit financial flows, corporate governance issues, and other important topics which relate to policy coherence for development. I will then give the floor to Humberto Campodónico, who is Principal Professor of the Faculty of Economics at the Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos in Lima. Humberto Campodónico is a consultant on energy issues for different organizations, including the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. He is a member of the advisory board of Revenue Watch Initiative, which is now called, as I understand, the National Resource Governance Initiative. And he has also been chairman of the board of directors of Peru. As I had the chance to go for teaching purposes to Peru, I remember that Humberto Campodónico was also a columnist, famous columnist in one of the major newspapers in Peru, especially working on economic and energy issues. And last but not least, we have Mr. Stéphane Graber, who is Secretary General of the Swiss Trading and Shipping Association. And before that, he was delegate at the Economic Development Office of the Republic and Canton of Geneva, in charge of promoting Geneva as an economic place. So without further ado, let me give the floor first to you, Werner Thut, for 10 minutes. Thank you.
First of all, good afternoon to everybody. I'm very happy to be here and would like to thank the organizers of the meeting to invite me to this debate. I believe very much in informed discussions, and I believe very much in informed decisions, and that's why I'm particularly happy to come to this center or to the Geneva, to do this in Geneva Graduate Institute. What will I talk about? As you may know, as you certainly know, in March 2013, the Federal Council submitted a groundbreaking report a background report on commodities, and with 17 recommendations. In the meantime, there was an intensive debate, and important domestic decisions were taken, and policy processes were accelerated. There were a number of parliamentary discussions and interventions, decisions. There was an intensive debate in the civil society. There was also, and I will not enter that subject very much, a debate at the international level, of course, even though the international environment is probably the key driver of our domestic processes. Of course, I will not tell you the whole story, what has happened since this groundbreaking report in 2013. I would rather briefly sketch out what the current Swiss debate is and consists of. Second, I would like to comment on the current dynamics and what has been achieved and what might be the future dynamics. And eventually, I would briefly drop a word on what the Swiss Development Corporation is contributing to the whole debate. So, what is the current debate and the agenda about? It's quite confusing. It's if not confusing, at least it's complicated. There are many issues interlinked, from taxation to corporate governance and trade issues. It's a constant back and forth between the parliament and the government currently, and eventually the Swiss sovereign cantons and the people entitled to vote chip in with initiative on a number of issues which are related to our topic. In this picture, I would like to identify or draw your attention to two different work streams, 2+2 I call it, which are actually relevant for our discussion. There's one focused discussion on transparency and accountability requirements in financial matters of companies involved in extractive industries and trading. Here, it deals with payments to governments and state-owned companies in developing, exporting countries. The second issue I would like to draw your attention to is a broader discussion on issues of corporate responsibility, ranging from concepts and ideas about a general obligation of companies to due diligence, specific reporting requirements, financial and non-financial issues, until purely voluntary schemes of corporate responsibilities. There's a broad range of ideas of what could be done and should be done, or might not be done or should not be done with regard to corporate responsibilities. Here the big question is, should we mix the different approaches? Should we come to a smart mix? And how would it have to look like so it is a smart mix between voluntary schemes and mandatory requirements? In these two fields, there is a broad discussion and intensive involvement of the Parliament. The government has submitted 2 reports analyzing and presenting solutions and at least options. At the same time, there's a number of parliamentary interventions of individuals and commissions requesting regulatory action. This is the first set of work streams I would like to draw your attention to. The second one is less advanced, but likely to develop additional dynamics in the future. One addresses the issue of financial flows related to physical commodity trade, and you certainly know that Switzerland is at the top, is the worldwide most important offshore financial center. So we have a mix of some call it even toxic, potentially toxic, a mix between financial flows and commodities trading in this field. The second issue, or the fourth in the whole list of 4 major issues I would like to mention, is agricultural commodity trading, including price speculation. This issue has not been much in the focus of the 2013 report, but in March 2014, a popular initiative has been submitted on the prohibition of food price speculation, and in this context, the Federal Council will present the report in the year of 2015. So we have a very rich menu, 4 important major processes with a different degree of parliament involvement, which is the menu we have, and we have to understand now. How can we assess this picture, this rich picture? Nothing new under the sun, no progress. that's probably the position, or certainly the position of some NGOs, which are now preparing a popular initiative to trying, or with the idea to fasten the developments on the domestic political agenda. And the decision will be taken by next spring whether this initiative will be launched or not. The second assessment one might take: does the Federal Council a careful and responsible job? Some people think yes, he does. And the third one may be: there is a rush to unnecessary regulation which is against the Swiss interests in general and above all. That might be something we might hear from our colleague from the commodity sector. Some people think there is an unnecessary rush to regulation. My assessment, and that is up for discussion: yes, the Federal Council acts carefully and responsibly. I do say that not because I'm a bureaucrat and I'm supposed to say that, but I say that because I base this conclusion on a meticulous analysis of the Federal Council's formal decisions in the full range of areas covered by the March 2013 report. In this report and further decisions, the government made clear that extractive activities and commodity trading are not an issue of management of reputational risks alone. But it's a real global challenge deserving attention and political action. Moreover, while the Federal Council stressed the importance of dialogue with the trading sectors and the commodity trading and extractive sectors, and the implementation of soft law instruments, the government never excluded mandatory regulation, and he considers a smart combination between regulatory measures on the one hand and soft law instruments on the other hand as an important option. With his willingness of an impartial reassessment of a number of political issues, essentially this government approach essentially is new and courageous in a field that is economically vital to Switzerland. This is all the more remarkable from a development cooperation perspective. The Swiss government is also clearly guided by its duty and commitment to reconcile global and national perspectives as well as long and short-term considerations, which is basically our perspective and mission within Swiss Development Cooperation. The big question, however, is what comes from now onward. Or as the Scottish say, the proof of the pudding is the eating. Meaning, 2 years after the March 2013 report, the center of political gravity in this particular field has shifted from the government to the parliament and to the people maybe. It will be up to the parliament and eventually the Swiss sovereign, meaning the population and the cantons, to make sure that after all there will be tangible results in terms of legislation and or implementation. Where is the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation in this overall picture? Since the very beginning, SDC, Swiss Development Cooperation, was actively involved in the 4 work streams. The 2 first ones ahead of the 2 second ones I mentioned. Actually, Swiss Development Cooperation is deeply convinced that what is decided in Switzerland matters a lot to developing countries. Within the government, SDC has actually constantly contributed to the decision-making from a development perspective. And we are proud and happy to say that we were part of this process, which I tried to explain to you and try to assess in a balanced way. In terms of content, we have been advocating for transparency and accountability. We have been advocating for taking into account legitimate interests of poor developing countries and exporting countries. And we have been advocating for alignment with international efforts. With regard to operations on the ground, which is of course a core business, our core business traditionally, SDC identified 6 partner countries in which we want to engage more in the coming years in the field of transparency and extractive industries. The countries are Bolivia, Mali, Burkina Faso, Mozambique or Tanzania, Afghanistan and Mongolia. We want to do that in a tailored and context-specific way, because it's way too difficult just to come up with one single blueprint solution. So we will take into account very much the specific conditions on the ground in these different contexts. Being here at the Geneva Graduate Institute, let me stress one final aspect of our commitment and engagement. In our view, independent research and analysis is extremely important. There is no dialogue without a minimal consensus about what is fact and what are just politically motivated, purely self-serving assertions. And there is even less of a chance that solutions, political solutions, can be found to the huge challenges we are facing. This said, I would like to congratulate the Geneva Graduate Institute for its efforts in this debate, to and make it possible, this debate, and to promote independent research in the last 2 years and before. And we would like to invite the center, and Gilles in particular, to even expand its effort, because we will all need a lot more knowledge about what's the situation on the ground, what are facts, and what are, on the other hand, just purely self-serving assertions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Werner, Thut, and thank you also for the invitation, which I take very seriously as soon as I'm back from my sabbatical. And without further ado, I give the floor to Humberto Campodónico.
Okay, good morning. I want to say, to thank the Graduate Institute of Geneva and the journal, which is International Development Policy, which has, in a way, convoked us here to talk about this very interesting and important issue about everything that concerns commodity trading and development. The main thing here, I would also say that this is a beautiful university and a beautiful auditorium, etc. Maybe we can have something like that in the years to come. Well, we are here in order to discuss deeper and broader issues. The matter is we have not much time for tackling on them in an exhausting way. So we will try to focus on the fundamentals and leave other things outlined for further debate, maybe after we are finished. Well, the first thing is the fact that Switzerland is mainly a trading hub. It is not a producer, and it is not a big consumer, like, for example, Germany, that has its policy for securing raw material supply. And being a trader is very important. Well, I think that Swiss people are the ones that are going to make Swiss policy. But if we take into account what is happening in the world, I would like to point out Dodd-Frank law in the United States and what has been done by the European Union here. And the Dodd-Frank law very clearly says that raw materials corporations have to disclose country by country and project by project what they do pay to the government of the countries where the raw materials are exploited. This includes production and distribution and also trading. The same thing has been approved by the European Union. I understand it does not apply to trading, but maybe somebody here can correct me. It does not apply strictly to trading. And I think that as the fact that there is a global value chain which comes from exploration, production, development, trading, and finally the fact that you're selling it to the final consumer or producer, this is something that has to be viewed in a holistic way. And we think that what is happening in the United States is very important, and that these vertically integrated industries should be treated as such, and then transparency should be one of the most important issues. I would like to point out concerning transparency that the EITI, the Extracting Industries Transparency Initiative, has now many countries coming in, and the United States is a candidate here. So I think the issue of transparency is of the utmost importance. Then the second thing that is regarded with this is one fact. Swiss corporations trade in stock exchanges outside Switzerland. So in some cases, for example, Glencore is in NASDAQ in the United States. So I guess that when NASDAQ asks for disclosure for all companies listed in that market concerning US laws at that moment, Glencore is going to have to disclose the information asked by the US government in order to have a safe place for investments there. So I think that it's a point about if we have globalization, we can not only have globalization in some terms and not in other ones. No. I mean, globalization is promoted. I mean, I don't want to get into a discussion of it. But if there are international rules, these international rules englobe, I don't know if that's the term in English, this. I think that, for example, voluntary codes, national, are not enough. Supporting UN resolution, having some more aid. I was just reading today in a journal here in Geneva, I'll say that in French. En 2013, les travailleurs étrangers en Suisse ont envoyé à titre privé au moins 6,5 milliards de francs dans leur pays d'origine. Ce montant est plus de 2 fois plus élevé que l'aide publique au développement consacrée par la Suisse dans le monde. Alors, well, what that means is that there are a lot of things to be done, and these things to be done have to be done in an according way, passing laws that can be reinforced. One other thing concerning, for example, financial flows. In the paper by Werner, it's very clear that we have to fight against illicit financial flows. But there are also problems with licit financial flows. And these licit financial flows, for example, concerning quantitative easing in the United States and a lot of money coming into our countries, they cause Dutch disease and other problems. But then when we want to propose to have capital controls, they are forbidden, and we have a lot of problems with our productive structure. So I think that, for example, one good way where the Swiss government could cooperate internationally with developing countries is in the fact that we need policy space. The space to promote our policies, and that they're not forbidden by international, let's say, free trade agreements or bilateral investment treaties, which in many ways oppose or are opposed to putting these controls. Then one other thing that is very important for us is what is the kind of relationship that Swiss companies or corporations have with national governments. I think we could discuss it later, but when Glencore and Strata were merging, Strata had a mine in Peru that is going to go into production, which is called Las Bambas, very big mine. And then the Chinese Minister of Trade said, we are not going to allow the merger of Glencore and Strata because you already provide us with 20% of the Chinese imports in copper. So if you want to merger and you want our permission, I don't know why Swiss companies need a permission from China, but that's what happened. They said, you have to sell Las Bambas. And both companies sold it. It has been acquired by a Chinese company, which is called China Ming Metals Corporation. What about the Peruvian government? Not much did my government say, but at the same time, as far as I know, we were not consulted if we wanted or not a Chinese company in our country, or whatever nationality it was, because the contract was originally made with a Swiss company. So I think that this also poses some important points related to horizontal relations or top-down relations. I mean, we sell our company, we have to sell in China, and that's it. I think that is one question that is very important. And I will finish with what is important for our countries. The fact is that we have had an extraordinary decade because of high prices, mostly because of the industrialization of Southeast Asia and of China. And this has brought a lot of growth, but at the same time, it has demonstrated the limits and the unsustainability of such type of growth. I will just only mention 2 points. One is transparency, I have already mentioned, and the importance that this has in the fight against corruption. And the other one is going beyond good governance. We are not in favor of this theory of the natural resource curse. That means that because we have natural resources, there's a kind of curse because our nations, those nations grow less than other ones that do not have natural resources. I think the problem is their good governance, and it's a problem of our own countries and the fact that they assume their own responsibilities. But in this transparency and this good governance that is important to go ahead with raw materials, I think that the world cooperation, and in this case Swiss cooperation, is very important in the fact, concerning the fact of what we can do with the resources, about our taxing system, about the distribution of those resources, and things having to do with decentralization of government, etc. Well, that is, in a way, something I think where our interests and the interests of Swiss people, government, parliament, can also interact in order to have natural resource-rich countries and, in general, benefiting from development politics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Humberto Campodónico. Now I give the floor to Mr. Stéphane Graber.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure, and I would like to thank the organizer for inviting us to participate in this policy debate, even if I generally not really think that the industry or the economic actors should tell the politics what they have to do. So I think, as it was mentioned by Werner Thut, that we have to participate in helping to establish the facts, because that's a very important part where we can play a role, and that's also why I would like to thank you, because it's also an opportunity to enhance the understanding of our industry and to understand and to establish the facts. And in that way, I think there is a natural cooperation between the authorities, the regulators and the industry in order to better understand an activity. But then when it goes about which policy a country should choose, that's really, I think, the role of the parliaments, of the authorities to define it. I would like to come back on, I didn't plan that, but I would like to pick up some of the elements that were said before. You mentioned the report that was published in March on the commodity industry in Switzerland. I think that was a very positive step in trying to establish what is the commodity sector in Switzerland, and doing also trying to understand the different aspects of this activity in Switzerland and what is its economic impact. I would like to mention that there was also a progress report that was published in March 2014, because there is an ongoing dialogue that is currently producing also some results because we have exchanges. I think we have done, there were also some studies that were mandated by the Department of Foreign Affairs, and that was and we participate in it in order to help to bring facts, so in order to improve this understanding, because as it was said also, and I agree fully with what Mr. Thut said before, we need to have good facts and to understand really what we are talking about in order to define good policies. I would like also to pick up something that you said. It's about, first maybe the smart mix also. That's something that I also wanted to say. I think Switzerland, and it's very misunderstood by the public and the general audience in general, the position of Switzerland, I really think is a very innovative one, because on one side, they are saying they are a part of regulatory elements that have to be brought in Switzerland, and this on a level playing field, so in accordance with what exists elsewhere. And I join what you said before. Our foreign, I think, no, it was the Justice Department in Switzerland that has, on the request of the Parliament, if my memory is good, did a comparative study of the Dodd-Frank Act, of what exists in Canada, on transparency and the elements around accountability. And there was a message of the federal government in June, very clear, based on this legal comparison report, to say Switzerland will introduce equivalent measure to what exists in other countries. So based on this very extensive, so for the one that are interested to read it, it's quite important work done by the Federal Department of Justice. So that was some of the point I wanted to just strengthen as an introduction. Now I also would like to bring some ideas. First, the definition of maybe when we talk about commodity trading, what it is. I think that's always important to understand. It's a very the commodity trading has a very important economic role worldwide, because they are balancing supply and demand. As you know, the supply is not spread equitably on the world, and you have places that have oversupply or that have supply of commodities, and other places that are lacking, that have demand but lacking these commodities. And so the role of the commodity traders is to bring together supply and demand, and to try to organize and bridge the gap between producer and consumers. So it's really this role of bridging the gap between supply and demand. It's an intermediary that brings a service. That's also something that is sometimes not well understood. It's bring a service, what kind of service? So it's a service, an access to the market. For example, for farmers, I just come back from Ghana. I was in Ghana last week. We visited some cocoa farm there. And the farmers, it's very important. The services brought by the commodity traders are fundamental. They help them to understand what the market needs, to see how they can access to the market, to also have a better use of their input, for example, the fertilizer, to use them properly in order to ensure good harvest. So there is today an evolution of the role of the commodity traders to be really a partner of the producer and bring them services in order to improve the revenues and the productivity of the farmers. And why? They are not doing that just because they think that it's good to do that. It's also because it ensures a sustainable long-term supply for them. So you have interest, if you are in the commodity trading industry, to ensure to have long-term relationship and sustainable relationship. And that's also what was mentioned before about reconciliating short-term and long-term development strategy. I think that the action of the STC is very important on the ground. The work done by the Swiss authorities with the STC is really very important, because there is a need in certain countries for more developing their skills, developing their ability to develop a good governance. And there is also such a role of developing and improving the governance of the companies, and that's something that has evolved a lot in the recent years. So that was my second point. There is today a growing role played by commodity traders in establishing macroeconomic equilibrium. It's part of the globalization of economy, the emergence of new economic centers like China, for example. What we saw in the last 10 years was something absolutely huge. I don't think that we will have such a development in the world again, and that was because suddenly China started to consume and to have a need because of its development for commodities, and who was able to answer this need and to bring and to reorganize the flows of goods in order to answer the needs for this development. It's the commodity traders. Their role, they invested in order to be able to fulfill this need and balance supply and demand. And what we saw is a very big increase in prices, because that's also something important. We always have to remember that prices are down by supply and demand. And that's what happened in the last 10 years. It's suddenly an explosion in the demand, and supply was, because of a lack of investment in 20 or 30 years ago, was a bit behind. And then when you have prices going up, what does happen? You have a stimulation of the investment. What happened? So we see more investment in order to produce more commodities, and then at the end the prices come again down, because you have a new equilibrium between demand and supply. And that's also something that we have to remember. Production and investment in extractive or mines or so, it takes 20, 30 years to be really productive and have an impact really on the supply. If you look at different projects in the world, they were started or planned 20 years ago, and they are not yet productive. So there is a big lack in the investment down on the side of supply, and the demand was evolving quite quickly. So that's explained also a little bit the equilibrium. And I will just finish maybe with one point, is that I wanted to raise, is really this, the markets and the traders are working in a globalized world. In fact, you said very rightly that a Swiss company, why you asked the question, why Glencore was accepting the condition of China. In fact, what we have to understand in Switzerland is that these companies, these commodity trading companies, their playing field, where they are active is the world. And they are subject to all the world regulation. The US one, because the stock markets are there, they are subject to EU regulation, they are subject to local regulation. So we are not, we have to think on a global scale, and that's something that we have to take into account. So there is no way today to escape or say, okay, in Switzerland we can do that, or in Switzerland we don't do that, because in fact for this activity, it's anyway they are subject to international and globalized regulation and impacts, as it was explained by your example. So I think that was.
Thank you very much, Stéphane Grabert. Also, thank to all of the three of you for keeping time. I think, as you know, the fourth contributor to our policy debate, which is online, is Alexandra Gilles, Head of Governance of Revenue Watch Institute. And I just want to raise 2 points that she made very strongly, and I don't do this to excuse the unbalanced gender nature of our panel, but maybe to bring two important points there. It's first, she insisted a lot on the need for transparency on the revenues paid to foreign governments, expanding not only to the mining industry, but also to the trading partners. And for her, with the Revenue Watch Institute insisting on the mandatory character. And the second aspect is something that Humberto Campodónico mentioned also, is the need to strengthen the budgetary and fiscal management capacities in resource-rich countries in order to improve the capacity of those countries to manage not only problems related with Dutch disease, but also the management of resource rent. So with this, I open the floor for discussion, debates. I will propose to take 3 comments, questions in a row and come back to the panel. If you can just shortly say who you are and be brief if it's possible. We have Maren with a mic. Who wants to start? So we have someone here.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm Janvier Nkurunziza from the UN UNCTAD, UN Conference on Trade and Development, and I work in the unit on commodities. So I'm very, very happy to be here, to hear the different perspectives from the different actors. And I was particularly interested in following Stéphane's presentation because he really presented the economics of commodities trading, which is, for me, which is fine. I mean, no one is, at least I don't think anyone would think that commodity traders are not useful or not important in our communities. I think they are. I think what we should probably have addressed here, which I haven't heard much about, is how to reconcile profit maximization, which is probably one of the main objectives guiding commodity trading companies, and the power balance between, let's say, trading institutions and some of the countries they are operating in. The representative from Peru mentioned very briefly this when he talked about China selling on the role of the government. How do we reconcile these two? My second point is a very quick one. It's about the mandatory character of the policies that are being thought about. I think we know the OECD has had a few guidelines on governance, but they are all, they are not mandatory. And I remember once I was in a meeting with Werner Thut. He kindly invited me in Bern to discuss ideas on illicit financial flows. And we had an OECD representative, and they acknowledged that the fact that it's not mandatory is really, it weakens the policy because very few or no one will want to follow that. So it's really to also try to say that there has to be some mandatory character, maybe in the mix that you talked about, have a mandatory character to these policies. And yeah, okay, let me stop here. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nicolas Mestre, and I work also for UNCTAD, though I'm going to talk here on my personal capacity. I would like to come back to a few points that were raised by Stéphane Graber also, so sorry for maybe the biased, my bias for what the panelists said. The first one is to come back, I mean, as a Swiss citizen, to the fact that you seem to be interested in not intervening in the policy-making process in Switzerland. That's what you said at the beginning of your presentation. And I was wondering, I mean, if you can guarantee that none of your members, for instance, are financing political party in Switzerland. I know that in the finance industry is not really the case, but maybe in the commodity area that's something different. Also coming back to your interest in good fact, I would like, for instance, to hear you on one important study that was recently produced by or financed by Trafigura, that's called The Economics of Commodity Trading Firm, and who's basically for which, the author that they selected is a well-known professor in the US, though named Craig Pirong, and who is, well-known for being, against any kind of regulation in the commodity sector. And finally, to come back to what you said about the prices that are the result of supply and demand. And here, I've done a couple of research with some colleagues, and I think there is really an important debate now that is linked to the financialization of commodity market. And if we just look, at the evolution of commodity prices over the last 10 years, the synchronicity that we have observed among different commodity markets, but also with some other equity market, I have my doubt, let's say, to say the least, that commodity prices always result from supply and demand, and that there is no effect, let's say, from speculation or other, participants that have a priori, not direct interest with the consumer or the producer, or the producing side, sorry. Of those markets. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mohammed Mahanni. I'm a master's student here at the Graduate Institute, first year International Affairs. So my question is towards the Swiss authorities again. I think 1 year ago exactly, the Swiss Federation declared that there are three main problems that the commodity trading is facing in Switzerland, and they are human rights and environmental damages, the corruption and money laundering, and finally the transparency that this is the department is facing. They declared that these three problems, they do not have the solutions for them. These three things, I want to know what happened since this year. Since the year they declared they are unable to find solutions for these three problems, and back to the point where the economics and politics, where they meet, and getting the facts right. I think one of the main things that they were actually discussing as well last year, the fact that they are unable to provide data about the commodities market. And this is one of the main things that they're actually facing in terms of transparency, and specifically under the agreement with the European Union and the USA Dodd-Frank section, where they it's quite unclear if the pricing of the commodities will fall under the transparency agreement or not.
Okay, so I propose that we come back here with the panelists. Who want to start? I think a number of questions were directed to you, Stéphane.
So I will try. I have particularly a lot of questions for the second intervenants, but for the first one, so there was you talk about the mandatory character of the regulation. I think, as I said, they are both. It's a smart mix. I think we have to have. On one side, there are some mandatory standards and some mandatory elements that are introduced in relation to what all the states also are doing. For example, in transparency, this project of law that is now being drafting by the federal authorities. You have also some other elements, for example, in derivatives financial products, that is also in a law that will be introduced or implemented next year, or The draft law will be finalized for next year, the ordinance. So there are mandatory elements of regulation. Next to that, the question is, what is the best approach in order to tackle some of the other problems? And that's where the Swiss authorities, but Mr. Thut will be able to answer that better because it's in his department, was to say we need also soft skills. And why do we need soft skills? And that's all the project of the Foreign Affairs Department that is supported by the federal authorities, is this multi-stakeholder dialogue on voluntary principle. Because if we look at the best practices today, what works? Because we are facing some of these issues, and I think we will face them still in the future. What works best today? And that's the analysis that was done by the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. It's today the multi-stakeholder initiatives. If you take the Better Cotton Initiative, the Better Gold Initiative, the Swiss initiative on security companies, all these initiatives have managed to bring at the table all the people involved, authorities, companies, NGOs, and try to really address the issue to first have a common understanding of the situation and try to improve it. And generally what we see with some of this experience is that these voluntary principles are becoming then benchmark, and these benchmark then are becoming standards. And today, with what we see, it's really the best approach. And I think, but Mr. Thut will be able to answer to that, I think that's why the Swiss government think that that's a good approach to tackle some of this problem, next to the other regulatory, mandatory aspects that have to be introduced. Now to the second set of questions. So you first, it was yes. You were asking about the members financing political parties. You are Swiss, so you know what is a professional association. So we are an association. I cannot tell. I don't have any view or any right to see what a specific member is doing or what is doing in his company. So we have members that are sharing a certain view with the association and going in one direction. And the direction we have is to contribute to the discussion, the dialogue, to bring facts, and to participate, to engage in such, for example, multi-stakeholder dialogue. That's for us important. I'm not a policeman that is able to go and see what this company or this one is doing, so I cannot answer you if some of them are or not financing some political party. I have absolutely no idea. Then you ask about the study of Trafigura and Craig Pirong. So I will not really judge on the relation and the elements that you raised. What I can say in the I met a few times Craig in different panels. I think he's a very good professional. He's a university professor, so I think he has also a deontology and ethics. I will not question it. I'm not allowed to do that. I think in the study as such, there are some interesting elements, and then I think everybody, because it's not hidden that this study was mandated by Trafigura, I think they also promoted it largely. So there is nothing secret in that. So then it's to the reader of the study to decide if how he takes it and to filter it if he considers that some things are influenced. But I think personally in what I read in it, that there are some good elements in that. Now on the debate on the financialization, I agree with you. In fact, if you look at all the studies, because you have a lot of studies asking about the effects of the financialization of the markets, and you don't have any conclusive result at the end, if it has an impact or if it has not. And probably the reason for that, and that's a study we are now doing, and we probably will end at the end of the year, I hope, finalized, and then it will be accessible for the people that are interested and on our internet site. What we see is that in all the elements in the history in the last 10 years, you had always some elements linked to demand and supply. And that was the main driver of the move of price. Then, effectively, there can be some difference in amplitude or volatility around it. But at the heart of it, at the core, you always have a question of demand and supply, of government intervention with ban. If you take 2010, you had some fires in Russia, some big drought, then Russia started a ban, and then the prices got up. So then that the financialization maybe increased the movement, that's possible. But at the fundamentals, the core remains a demand and supply balance. And finally, maybe I should let also the others answer to the question. So the last one were more politics. So.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Well, I would like to take on the question that was formulated by the member of Thut, saying in a way, how can we reconcile, let's say, the profit maximization principle of a private company with what the governments have to do in order to promote welfare for the people. I don't know if it was exactly like that as it was formulated, but I think that is a very important question. And I would like to say the following concerning trade and traders. You know, I was just looking at a graph here done by the WTO, the International Trade Statistics of 2013, page 8, and it says 51%. The top 10 merchandise traders accounted for just over half of world merchandise trade in 2012. So when we talk about supply and demand, I mean, this is a very concentrated trading, is very concentrated. And what is the statistics for the concentration of trade in minerals and oil? I'd guess the 10 biggest ones are about 50% of the market also. So I think this issue takes us to the fact that there has to be some kind of mandatory regulation of these trading companies. No, that's I mean, if you think of it with the Herfindahl-Hirschman index, for 10 companies to have 50% is way ahead of the 18 or 19% that the IHH says. We don't have a global institution ordering financial or commercial issues, but I think that is one point that is very important. A second point about the financiarization of commodity markets. I mean, it's not that it's not inconclusive. I mean, Werner also said that in his paper, and I argued against that. There is documentation from UNCTAD very, very clearly about this. And not only that, in the United States now it's a law. It's a law that says that banks and other financial entrepreneurs cannot have much more than a limit when they go in commodity trading bodies. And this is already put up by the CFTC, which is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission of the United States. This is going on, it is enforced. There are some claims by the companies, really, they are. But I don't think this is an issue where it is inconclusive. I really have a divergence of opinions with my colleagues here. I mean, it's something that has been proven, and there's many points to that. And then, well, I would finish with that just by saying that there has to be mandatory rules and laws that have to be complied by let's say, mining companies, oil companies, and also trading. As I said initially, this is a vertically integrated industry. I mean, you don't win anything if you have, let's say, transparency only in the production of the mineral or of the oil and of the payments that are made by the company to the government. That's one issue. The trading issue is as much as important as that one. Thank you.
Thank you. I just see that it's already 1:30, so I will give the floor to Werner Thut for responding, but also if you have concluding remarks, you can do them at the end of your responses. And then, I'm sorry, I think we won't have time to go back to the floor to pick up further comments and questions. So the two other panelists, if they want, have also an opportunity to make a concluding remark before closing.
Thank you very much, Gilles. Thank you very much for your questions. I think it's very difficult to answer to all these questions because they feed into each other, and the world is obviously very complex. So let me try to give you just some hints without being necessarily very precise in the answers to your questions. I would like to come back to one thing which has been mentioned a couple of times: how to reconcile different interests. I think this is the key question of the debate we have, and part of it is, on the one hand, obligations of companies. This is one thing, and which brings us to governance issues, of corporate governance issues. At the same time, however, when it comes to reconcile, when it comes to establish policy space in developing countries, we would also have to talk about investment treaties, the regime of investment treaties, of investment protection treaties. This is a huge debate, and which is an area which will be even more dynamic in the coming months and years, and I'm happy to know that the UNCTAD is also thinking in these terms. I think that's something we really have to address. It goes beyond the debate we have in Switzerland on how to regulate commodity trade specifically. It includes also free trade agreements and investment treaties. What happened? A young colleague, a young student mentioned that he dropped a couple of keywords: human rights, money laundering, transparency. What happened in the meantime? It's very difficult to answer because so many things are happening at the same time in these very complex, independent but very complex issues. This is not just a cheap excuse. It's rather, I try to say we would need much more time to give you a precise answer on what's going on, but I can tell you that there is, and I tried to make it in my presentation, there is a dynamic on the government side to open up these discussions, to come back to previous positions which have been stable for many years, which are not stable and for granted any longer as they have been. This goes to the questions like how much mandatory, how much voluntary. I would say it's not just there is no blueprint which is fine for each and every problem. We have to see in each specific issue which kind of solution is possible. There's quite a lot of evidence that in some areas voluntary principles are just not complying with what they promise. So we will have to see what is possible and what makes sense. Mandatory is not a no-go in many areas, and that's just because there is no other way. And something I would like really to draw your attention to is that it's more in the Swiss context than just importing and accepting and mandatory requirements which have been established in other countries like the EU, like in the US, like Dodd-Frank. It's thinking beyond that. It's not a big deal to do the same mandatory requirements in Switzerland because our companies sitting in Switzerland have to comply with them in other countries anyway because they are registered and listed in these countries. So the challenge goes beyond that. It comes to the point: do we have a particular responsibility, being the country we are in being going beyond that? Could we lead in international efforts, initiatives, and trying to contribute ideas, not just following what others do, but trying to develop and contribute ideas on that? And this is actually something that the Federal Council in a number of decisions has said that he's ready to do that. that does not mean that we will leave this level playing field. What we will try to contribute innovatively to what the challenges are and how to address them. And maybe a last point which has not been mentioned a lot, but it needs to be stressed from our side as a development corporation. Yes, there are capacity limits in developing countries. We are working on that. We need to do more on that. The Federal Council has said that he would do more on that, strengthening ministries, contributing to better governance in developing countries. So this is the ordinary, the genuine task of a development cooperation agency, and we are about to do that, and we want to do that in particular also our colleagues from the SECO in the Ministry of Economic Affairs. So there is this kind of things going on. And one last final comment, if you allow me, Gilles. We are talking about national regulations. The problem is much more a problem of global governance. We have to go beyond. We have to find transnational standards and implementations of these standards. And that's actually what is a challenge for our countries. And there is this post-2015 process, which is a new global social contract between developing countries and developed countries. And there we would have to find solutions where we go beyond just the national solutions. And the Swiss government has decided and has made its points very clear. Switzerland is prepared to implement a global framework of mutual obligations and mutual according to different possibilities. We are part of the world. We want to be part of the world. We want to take our part of responsibilities. This is just in the middle of the process. Let's see where we will be in a year's time. But that's more than just protecting our own small garden, but looking beyond our small garden, seeing what it means for the globe and what it means in the long term.
Thank you. Would any one of you like to also bring a concluding remark before we close the session?
No?
Okay, so I just would like to agree with effectively the idea that it's not just following the others, but it's finding a way also to contribute positively by developing a model, and that's probably Switzerland can show a way in that to reconciliate prosperity for the companies on one side and good corporate social responsibility on the other one. And that's exactly what we are trying to do together with the authorities, together with the Foreign Department of the Department of Foreign Affairs in this multi-stakeholder dialogue. And I think it starts by the mutual understanding of the needs of both, so that at the end, if we want to be effective and to bring some answers and solutions that are innovative to problems that exist for not centuries, but at least decades, and that we, as I said, probably will continue to exist. To be innovative, we need to be able to dialogue and find a win-win-win approach, win for the companies, win for corporate social responsibility, and win for the authorities.
Well, I would like only to say that it's very important for what has been said here, that I could summarize in saying for Switzerland to be the leader and not the follower. It's very difficult to implement it maybe, but not just follow what others are doing, but having their own policies to go ahead. I think that is very important to go for transnational standards. I think that this issue is very important not only in commodity trading, it is important in some other global issues that we have to tackle. Next week, in the next month, we're going to have in Lima, Peru, the COP20, which is going for climate change. The last conference is going to be here in Paris, not here, in Europe. And if all countries do not go for one common goal, which is reducing emissions, it's a big problem. I mean, extrapolating, but knowing that it is not exactly the same thing because it has another dimension, economic and trading, I think this kind of problem here is the same. It will not be solved by only one country. not Switzerland, not the United States, not Europe, but with a common effort. Because that's the kind of world we have right now, and maybe that's one of the most important conclusions that we could draw. Thank you.
Well, stay tuned because we will continue to, well, first you can see the written contributions in our website, International Development Policy, and with the journal we will continue to examine, research, publish on this very important topic. Thank you for your participation, and I propose to make a big applause for our panelists and thank Humberto for coming all the way from Lima. Thank you.